in terms of the Lions, he had Donovan Jackson, the interior offensive lineman, going 28th overall to the Detroit Lions in his latest mock draft. And the way he kind of explained it was the Lions have they built their culture right there when Holmes and Campbell took over. The first thing they did was address the trenches, the offensive line and the defensive line, and each of their first three picks in that first draft were on one either side of the ball with the line. Penei Sewell, Levi Onwuzurike, and Lee McNeil. Boom, boom, boom. And they started to really address the trenches in that first draft. And then as time has gone on, you've seen them kind of stack playmakers, guys like Jamison Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs, and you've got your flashy edge rusher and Aiden Hutchinson. Like your skill guys are now in place. And now the thought process for Jeremiah is if the Lions are continuing to follow that track, it might just be the time to go full circle and go back to the trenches. And so he had Donovan Jackson with his pick. He mentioned North Dakota State offensive lineman Gray Zabel as another potential guy. Tyler Booker is another guy to keep an eye on from Alabama. And then in terms of edge rushers, I was really intrigued by the fact that he mentioned a guy like Tennessee's James Pierce, who, if you look at the different mock drafts and where certain media outlets have him, he's all over the place. He could go top 15. He could go end of the first round. He could go second round. Like there's just so many varying opinions on him. He's an electric player who, I mean, his ability to get off the ball, he's super explosive. And I've really liked what I've been able to see on tape from him to this point. And then another guy, Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, who's kind of a hybrid. Maybe he's suited a little bit more on the interior based on his frame, but again, he's got some pass rush juice as well, and a really solid run defender. So those are a couple of the guys he mentioned as far as fits at 28. But then you took a look at, I mean, there was a lot of Lions representation on this call, and you took a look at some of the guys that he thought could fit the Lions in terms of being Swiss Army knives. So what were your thoughts on a couple of the names he mentioned, and how do you see that potentially fitting the Detroit Lions?
Yeah, I just think that first and foremost, what the kind of pattern that's developed and emerged with Brad Holmes is they want draft picks that not only are just like they want prospects that can do a bunch of different things. Like you want an individual like Brian Branch, where you see that, okay, if there's a need at nickel, boom, you can put him there. If you transition him where he started as a nickel cornerback, but then the potential when you lose a safety like CJ Gardner Johnson to the Eagles, you put him back there and he shines. And similarly with Ifatu Melifonwu, the issue for him has been health, but he transitioned from playing cornerback to safety and having a variety of roles doing different things. And that just allows your defense to have so much more of an advantageous situation, right? When you have players that are able to do a bunch of different things. And I think that's where you recognize how Brad Holmes has done. And I think that that's the next step is recognizing, okay, with Broderick Martin and with Mekhi Wingo, what they can do and how they're able to handle everything. So I'm curious to see how it's all going to shake out with the prospects that, are going to be targeted. But he listed three, and I think the first name that caught everybody's attention is Ole Miss's J.J. Peggs. I think that what he can do is unbelievable in regards to somebody that can play defensive tackle and then is also somebody that can put the football in his hands and do some things offensively. So that's somebody that you classify as a football player. But I think that he'd project a little bit more toward being a defensive tackle. But what Jeremiah highlighted was, there's a lot of interesting players in the league, especially with the Ravens, who've also taken defensive players and put them at fullback. You have opportunities to kind of have some skill advantages for guys that have the ability. They've seen what JJ can do with the football in his hands out there at Ole Miss. So he's very intriguing in the fact that he can do a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different things. I like the reference to USC running back Woody Marks, somebody that is very productive and can be somebody that can compete with Sione Vaki or Craig Reynolds if you want to add competition. And then the name that was intriguing when you heard it and then go back and look at what he can do, but he's not going to be at the combine, is Willie Lampkin from North Carolina. Somebody that is just, that I think the appeal was the fact that he at 5'10" and 270 pounds, he's a center, but so athletic that can do a bunch of different things for pulling offensive lines. And one of those situations in which you've seen different situations where the Detroit Lions maybe need some more athleticism along the offensive line. And I'm curious to see, because the Lions have targeted some of those HBCU, or they've scouted players from Canada. They've scouted some players from like William and Mary. So they've looked at players that maybe that are not so the way you look at it is not right like right there from the SEC. And maybe North Carolina's Willie Lampkin is somebody that, maybe on paper doesn't look like size-wise can do things, but can do a bunch of maybe different things. I would say he's probably more the long shot, but I think the intriguing aspect. What did you think of the reference to Ole Miss's defensive tackle? Because I thought that when you look at it from the scouting perspective, I think he definitely jumps off the screen as somebody that could be both a Dan Campbell and a Brad Holmes guy.
Oh, 100%. My initial reaction is I want this guy on my football team, right? I mean, I think that he is just the prototypical like Detroit Lion. When you go back and look, and Daniel Jeremiah says that, and that's not a prospect I was super familiar with going into the call. Obviously, the names, but there's just not enough hours in the day to get to everybody at this stage of the offseason. But so then I when I hear the name and I hear everything he can do, it's like, okay, well, let's go check this out. And yeah, I mean, he is. It's unbelievable. They throw him out there at H-back. He'll block in the run. He'll carry the ball as a wildcat quarterback. And then, oh, by the way, he's a really good defensive tackle. Like
Yep.
I think that when you look at the Lions draft history and you see a guy like this, like they're not the same player by any means, but the versatility reminds me a lot of the Lions and what they did with Sione Vaki last year. Now, I'm not saying they're going to make JJ Pegues the backup quarterback by any means, but just the ability to do different things well and having the natural instinct. When Vaki was drafted, they talked about how they were moving him to running back because of natural instincts, and a lot of what Pegues offers defensively, you can see the instincts at the defensive tackle position. So no, I don't expect him to change positions. I mean, maybe there could be a package for him at fullback at the next level, but I still think that what he does athletically, he's a natural. I think that there are some developmental things that he can stand to fine tune. I don't expect him to be a first round pick by any means, but I think that versatility can be kind of a defining factor that can help him get bumped up in the middle rounds, where maybe if he's projected to be a fourth round pick, somebody sees that versatility and says we can work with this, and so now they go and get him in the third round. So I really like the versatility that he has to offer. It's so fun to see him be able to do different things. I think he's a really fun football player to watch. And the Lions do have a need on the interior defensive line. Like I do see him as potentially being a guy who can come in and contribute, and he's got all the athletic tools. And with Casey Rogers, you've got one of the best in the business as your defensive line coach. And you see a player like Pegues, and if Casey Rogers can't iron out what needs to be ironed out, then maybe nobody can. So if you're the Lions and you see a developmental defensive tackle like that who has the traits athletically and instinctually to be a really good football player, then why not go get him? And so I think that moving forward, this should be a name we watch out for, where whether it's leaked combine interviews or pro days, things like that, I wouldn't be surprised that the Lions do their due diligence on him moving forward.